So that is a good overview of all 9 types. And I just want to point out a few of the pages and what they look like in your report where you'll find the information about your main type. On page 6 and 7, you will see this overview description of your main type. And for this particular type 9, we see here the key motivational driver, which is what the Enneagram best represents, what drives us. How will that influence my thinking, my feeling, my acting? What are the potential blind spots? And you can see this column in your report showing the worldview and the focus of attention. This is our stance to the world and our core fear and what we're trying to solve for, the gifts of the type and the vice of the type, what's happening kind of when we're in the grips of our personality. The next 2 pages will share the strengths of your type, and these are really good pages to just say, what fits me? Put a plus sign next to everything that fits, maybe a minus sign next to things that don't. And over on the weaknesses and challenges, the same thing. What fits you and what doesn't? And if you have a little bit of an eek factor going, oh, I don't like that, you're probably on the right type for yourselves. We tend to want to resist some of the things that if you're really honest with yourself and ask yourself the question of, can I think of any example where that's been true for me? We'll usually be able to find those. I want to talk for a moment about instincts and the subtype. So we all have 3 survival instincts. They are self-preservation, our desire to make sure we're okay, the one-on-one instinct, our desire to bond and connect, and our group instinct, our desire to make sure we're in the herd and not out of the herd. And this is going to be listed on pages 10 and 11. On the bottom of page 10, whatever your 3 instincts are listed in order will be your stacking for instincts, with your primary instinct being on top. So let's briefly describe the 3 instincts. You have all 3. The self-preservation instinct is focused on survival, and it can be basic things. Do I have enough sleep? Do I have enough water or food? Am I being safe in other important ways? I'm not making big, risky decisions that could be threatening. So self-preservation is a core instinct. When that is in the lead, we tend to be a little bit more independent because I can rely on myself. I don't want to necessarily have to rely on you. The one-on-one instinct prefers kind of the intensity of connection. So this is a bonding or a connection instinct. I want to have an intense one-on-one connection. And so when the one-on-one instinct is the preference, you might be somebody who desires one-on-one connections and deep, meaningful connections, or the intensity of experience. So sometimes when the one-on-one instinct is in the lead, you'll find people who like intense things like bungee jumping or high drama situations. Finally, the group instinct, sometimes called the social instinct. This is not about being social or wanting to be social. It's about my orientation is toward the group I'm in, and where do I fit in the group, and wanting to make sure I am fitting in the group, or paying attention to what's happening for the group. This person might be more aware of who's got power and resources, and I might want to align with that person or the people that have more power and resources. When we marry up the subtype, the instinct with the main type, we get a subtype. So the subtype might be a self-preservation 3, or a social type 5, or a one-on-one type 1. And so that description is on the top of page 11. And this is probably the best half page to describe your unique flavor of your main type. Continuing in the report, we will find centers of expression starting on page 12. And if you think about Enneagram really describing what's inside of us, what motivates us, the center of expression is what I'm expressing out to the world. It's how others might experience me. And there's an action center, a feeling center, and a thinking center. And if you think about an action center, if that were super high for someone, this is someone who is really hot, quick to move into action. Come on, let's go. And They trust their gut and they respond quickly. The feeling center, if that were high for someone, would be warm, caring, considerate. They might smile more. And if you have somebody who has a high thinking center of expression, which is what this graphic represents, they might lead with a more cool energy. They'd be a bit more detached, objective, analytical. We have all three, and probably you have something that's high, something that's medium, something that's low. You might have two that are medium. In an ideal world, balance is better. The other way to think about this is if you had three muscle groups, kind of the muscle group that's fast to go into action, trust the gut, that would be the action center. The muscle group that's oriented a little bit more to impact on others, that might be the feeling center. How do others feel about things? How do you feel about them? How are you going to respond to how people feel about them? And the thinking muscle group, which is a little bit more cool and objective and analytical. We want to be able to use all three. All three can be really helpful. You will see on page 12 and 13 descriptions about your centers of expression and the impact. And then on the bottom of page 14, you'll see a diagram that looks like this. And you see this 3x3 grid. And I will point this out and I'll also decipher this with you. This first row, which has the finger, is the action center. The second row is the feeling center. The third row is the thinking center. And each of these rows will have one of the columns colored in. I want to go back to the model. The action center types or preferences are the types 8, 9, and 1. 8s like to take charge. 1s like to control themselves. 9s like to take action that keep peace and harmony and avoid conflict. They're all action types, and you will have one of these as a preference. In the feeling center, our feeling types are 2, 3, and 4. 2s try to create a positive relationship and image by being helpful. 3s try to do that by being effective, efficient, successful, getting things done. 4s will try to be authentic and unique. And so you have one of these as your preference. And finally, you have a thinking preference. And our three thinking types are type 5s, gathering information, thinking, being objective, analytical, really trying to make sense of the world. 7s, big picture thinkers, strategizing, visionary, what's ideal we can move toward. And 6s are in the middle. What they tend to focus on is the risks, the hazards, because they can't have perfect information about all the possibilities. So they're trying to keep the group safe. So you're going to have one of these as your thinking preference. And the way you sort through which is your preference is to decode your 3x3 grid using these numbers. So on that top line, the internal action, feeling, and thinking preference are the types associated with strict perfectionist, intense creative, quiet specialist. The external focus for the action, feeling, and thinking types are 8, let's make things happen, active controller. 2, let me pay attention to you. What do you need? I'll be helpful. 7, what's the big picture that we can enthusiastically move toward? And the numbers in the middle are the contradicted numbers, are types 9, 3, and 6. And so whatever is colored in on your 3x3 grid, just make a note of the numbers associated with that. And that will give you what we call your tri-type or triadic center of expression. But what's super important is one of those will be your main type, and the others will give you an indication of your action preference, your feeling or relating preference, and your thinking preference. And so this starts rounding out how you're much more than your main type. We would call that a tri-type. The other concepts in your report that you might see are your wings. Every type has 2 wings, and simply the wings are the numbers on either side of your main type. So for type 9, the wings would be 1 and 8. And these will give us some great developmental pathways. Can I use the qualities of the types on either side of me to round out my full suite of behaviors? This is one way to explore. And for a quick snapshot, here are the wings for all of the types. So you can say, if I'm a type 2, I'm going to naturally be considerate and empathetic. Can I also be more discerning and borrow from the qualities of the strict perfectionist who will be more objective? Can I also be a little bit more self-oriented and say, what do I want to accomplish so that I'm successful? And every type can grow and expand by using the wings, the 2 types on either side of me. Also in your report, you will see a stress and strain profile. This is point in time. And so there were some questions in your assessment that you took that asked you to consider the last 2 or 3 months. And these were very straightforward questions. This is the only section in the report where your data is compared to others. So these data points are showing you where you fit in the bell curve of other people in the data set. And so red, yellow, green will mark how much stress and strain you're currently feeling in this current period of time. So you'll get an overall stress strain score that's in the middle. And each of these, there's a section that describes each of these. Interpersonal stress strain has to do with how much stress you're feeling in the relationships that matter most to you, or the quality of time you're spending there. Environmental strain, or the environmental factor, includes 2 things. Do you feel safe in your home, in your community, in your neighborhood? And are you able to get outside, or you feel like you're stuck inside more than you want to be? Psychological strain, how much stress and anxiety are you carrying around? Happiness level, this is sort of the inverse. We want to see green here, which would indicate that you have joy and you experience joy on a daily basis. So low stress and strain here will give you a higher mark. And so you want green here as well. Physical stress strain would indicate to what extent are you taking care of your body? Do you get enough sleep? Are you exercising? Do you weigh what you want to weigh? So it's very straightforward. How are you taking care of your body? And the more we're neglecting that, the more likely this will be yellow or red. And finally, vocational stress or strain has to do with how capable and confident do you feel in your job? Do you have enough challenge, not too much challenge? Do you have a good working relationship with your leader? Are you working on things that inspire you? And so all of that rolls together. And you don't need an assessment to tell you whether or not you're experiencing a lot of stress or strain in any of those areas. And this will give you a snapshot of your current level of stress and strain compared to others. We also know there's a little overlay. Our type will influence our perception of stress or strain. Types 3s and 7s, for instance, tend to see the world a little bit more optimistically, or may not want to admit the stress and strain they're feeling. Types 4s and 6 may actually feel more stress and strain given their orientation. So there's no good or bad here. This is just a place to start. And there are some developmental suggestions, especially if you are in the red zone on any of these. So how do we use any of this information for development? This assessment is called Integrative Enneagram. What we want to do is integrate more and more and more of these qualities and aspects into our world so that we have a much bigger repertoire to choose from. Remember, we said the Enneagram doesn't box you in, it just shows you how small you've made your box. So in an ideal world, I would be able to access all of the 9 types and the qualities that come naturally to the 9 types, and be able to be more conscious and be more able to see my blind spots and relax them. One place to start would be where we just were speaking, the stress strain profiles. If you are red in any of those elements, and especially if you are red across the board, that's a good place to start. do a little triage to say, what needs to happen for me to move out of the red zone on this particular aspect of stress and strain? For all of us, using this information to increase our awareness of our patterns and our habits is helpful. Awareness is self-correcting. As soon as I'm aware what my type tendencies are, I can start loosening the grip that they have on me. I can start seeing my blind spots. So if I can understand my habits of attention and response, I might start seeing where I'm not even aware that it's a habit. And so start recognizing your blind spots. Identify helpful shifts. And the most helpful shifts will usually be right at the core of my main type. If my type is 9 and I tend to be a peacemaker and avoid conflict, maybe a helpful shift will be to be aware of, when do I really want to start inserting my point of view, even if it feels like it might cause some tension. Where it's an important decision, I might say, I need to speak up anyway. So identify helpful shifts, and you'll see developmental suggestions throughout your report. The other place to think about development, if you've done a lot of the first few bullets on this page, is to access your lines for greater development. What are your lines? There's a page that talks directly to your lines of development in your report. But if you look at our model, every type is connected to 2 other types. So for instance, the type 5 has a line moving toward type 7 and a line moving toward type 8. Both of these are developmental pathways. So the 5 who is used to making sense of the world and gathering information and ultimately saying, I think I've got it. I think I've got a mental construct that works. The 5 can grow and develop by moving more quickly into action, not waiting for all of the information to make sense of things, but let's move a little more quickly, which comes naturally to the 8. Or instead of saying there's one way that makes sense, to perhaps see the world as more of possibilities, or to be a little bit more spontaneous like the 7 might. For the 7 benefits by doing deeper focused research like the 5 does. And the type 7 also benefits by having a little bit more order and structure and focus on details, which doesn't necessarily come naturally to the 7. So we would call the lines great developmental pathways for each type, and they tend to be polarities, meaning that, for instance, the type 3, who is so focused on what do I need to do to be successful? What are my goals? How do I make them happen effectively, efficiently? The 3 may not naturally think about how will the group succeed and where are the risks. The 3 may not naturally think about what actions will make the greatest amount of harmony, and the type 9 quality of going with the flow a little bit. The 3 tends not to do that super well. So the lines tend to be areas that may be a little harder to access for each of us, and they may present really strong paths of development. So that's what we mean by developing on the lines. Other suggestions: read more. You see on this slide one of my favorite recommendations, which is the Beatrice Chestnut book, The Complete Enneagram, 27 Paths to Greater Self-Knowledge. And if you're saying, why are there 27 paths? She does a great job of describing the subtypes. So the self-preservation, one-on-one, and social type 6, and she's got a beautiful write-up of all of those. As you might be doing in your own teams, share your types in a team setting. And you can do that simply by each person sharing, here's what I learned about myself. Here's what's true for me. Here are my strengths. Here are my challenges. Here's how best to work with me. That's a great place to start. If you're interested, you can create a team report, which will aggregate your team's results, given your types, your leaders' types, and say, these are your team types and team centers of expression and your team preferences and your strengths and underdeveloped areas. So you can always create a team aggregate report, and you can always arrange for a personal debrief or a team debrief with me or another accredited practitioner. This is my contact information. I would be happy to support you in big or small ways as you start working through the Enneagram and learning more about yourself, your colleagues, and your team. I hope you enjoy your journey. I love this tool. I love what it unlocks for us. Please feel free to reach out if I can support you. And I hope this has been super helpful for you. And you're just getting started. So enjoy the process.